Welcome to the Engineering Influence podcast. My name is Allison Schneider, and I'm joined today by Dave Bender and Nando Gomez with our advocacy team here to talk about all things 118th Congress and what we have on deck for the Biden administration. Thanks for joining us.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Dave, let's start with you. I know the PAC set all kinds of records last year. Tell me about those records and how you were able to do it.
Well, thank you, Allison. It was a great year in 2022. Our members really stepped up to the plate. Each state has a PAC champion, which is a volunteer member that helps and assists me and my team in the PAC. They raise money for the PAC, and the records that we set were just unbelievable this last year. They include a record high of $1.277 million, which was $130,000 over last year, which also was a record year, which was great. We had 45 state member organizations reach their PAC goal. Again, another record on that, which was awesome. 2 states actually raised over $100,000 each, California and Texas, the first time ever any state has ever done that. And we had about 3,100 people total, members giving to the PAC. And that's just a really great year that we had.
I know that this started during the pandemic when our DC convention was not held in person. Can you talk a little bit more about going back to in person and how that was able to help?
Sure. That's a good point you brought up, Allison. When the pandemic hit, we were weeks away from our annual convention. And that's when people come out to meet with their members of Congress to talk about issues in their district and with the engineering industry. We couldn't do that. So we kind of panicked. And then once the panic settled in and we got a little comfortable with this, Steve Hall, our boss, basically said, let's get together with these folks virtually. Let's just see what we can do. We don't have to do it over a 2 to 3 day period. Let's do it a 2 or 3 month period and try to get as many people to connect with these members of Congress virtually. And the result was we had probably an estimated 20 to 25 ACEC members that participated virtually in each one of the meetings. I think we had over 300 meetings versus if we had it in person, there'd be 4 or 5 from each state, or maybe sometimes only 1 or 2 that go in and actually meet with their member of Congress. So we connected more people, more of our members to see, although it was virtually, with their members of Congress. And that's the really first time that a lot of them ever participated in any type of governmental meeting with their member of Congress. And it helped really elevate our political process.
So do you think getting them more involved virtually helps transition them to getting them involved in the PAC going forward?
Absolutely. Expose them. They saw their members of Congress just as regular people, just doing a job just like they are. They weren't intimidated by it. And they saw the value of connecting with them so they could talk comfortably to visit with them about their issues. And now that's transferred into, now that things are in person, we're seeing more activity with our members from ACEC connecting with their members of Congress in a variety of the states.
Nando, can you talk a little bit about why the PAC is important? I know that it helps get our members involved and have them understand the political process a bit.
Yeah. Well, it's the why of the PAC is important is because it provides the needed resources for a lot of the members need to raise funds for their campaigns. And as speaking from experience, I ran several congressional campaigns, and they are expensive. So the PAC is one way where we were able to help members of Congress to raise those needed resources, in which campaigns, when I was running, we raised $1 million for a safe district. Now you're talking about 5 to 10 times that amount these days. So the PAC is a great enabling tool for our members to introduce themselves to, especially the freshmen and sophomore members of Congress, who remember that at the beginning they were there. To help them out get elected to Congress. So it's one way, and it's a great tool for our members to be directly involved with members of Congress.
Dave, can you talk about how the PAC comes to be? How do you look at the landscape and decide going forward what the PAC's going to look like and what you need to do?
Sure, it's a fun process, at least for me anyway, us geeks in this situation, but it takes quite a while to put this together. So after each election, we figure out who all the winners were, and sometimes in some races these days it takes a month or so to declare winners. Yeah. But we formulate that. We put them all together in a spreadsheet. We kind of take a look at the previous years, previous PAC budgets. We take a look at, how many new members of Congress. This year happen to be quite a few new members of Congress. So we have to kind of take a look at them, find out what we can about them, whether it be in-person meetings, at meet and greets, or intel from other colleagues, maybe outside the industry, but also our members too, which this past year we had a lot of members come up to us and say, hey, you got to meet so-and-so. So we put that together. We circulated along the great staff of the advocacy staff that we have that have a lot of experience and a lot of connections and contacts in Washington, D.C. And they give us we meet and we get some feedback from them. We also meet with some of our outside colleagues to see how their PAC budgets are shaping up. And then finally, we also meet with various members, ACC members that have a presence in government affairs, and get with them and see what their priorities are and who they like and who they want to sit down and meet with. Once that is all done, we meet as a staff, get it all kind of packaged up. Linda gets involved and reviews it a little bit, and then it goes out to our PAC champions. 51 state budgets, if you include Metro DC, are being sent out. In fact, I just hit the 51st button just moments ago to send out their PAC budget to their PAC champions and the executive directors, who are also very key and crucial to this, seeking their feedback. And once they send back questions or comments or add this, take this out or whatever, we then meet as a whole of the PAC Champions Committee, and they vote to approve the budget at that point.
Great. It's so important to support the members of Congress that are supportive of our industry. Let's talk about the 118th Congress. I know there are a lot of new members this year. Let's dive into what the new breakdown is.
Yeah, there's 78 new members of Congress this year, which is pretty high.
It is.
Sometimes you'll see 40 to 50, but this year was really, really high. I happen to think the great thing, just with the new election being held with the death of a congressman from Virginia, they elected the 150th woman to Congress just last night in this Congress, which is a record. It's still not quite enough, not even near enough women in Congress, but they are making some progress, which I thought was pretty good. The other interesting thing that I'm taking away from this Congress is the Republicans took the House this time, and they did it with a 5-seat majority, basically. The interesting thing is, of those members, that 50% of those members that are in that caucus, in the Republican House caucus, have never served in majority. Half of their members have never served in the majority. So I think there's gonna be some bumps, obviously, along the way as they kind of feel their way through this Congress.
And Allison, just to add to the point about the makeup of the new Congress, this is one of the youngest freshman classes ever. As far as it includes the Generation Z member, Maxwell Frost, Congressman Maxwell Frost from Orlando, Florida, 25 years old. I mean, wow. He's right at the minimal age, I believe. You have to be 25 to be a member of Congress. So you start at 25 and on through. There's plenty of members that, surprisingly, is in their 20s and 30s. And that's just a different way to engage the members, to kind of talk about the issues and maybe connect it to their age group and their generation. I'm a Generation Xer, so is, I think, believe Dave here, right? We have to talk a certain way to them, and because that's the reality on the ground as far as the makeup of Congress, which makes it for very challenging, but it's also exciting as well.
That's a great point. It really spans the gamut. We're seeing younger members of Congress, younger members in leadership. Congressman Jason Smith is now chair of the Ways and Means Committee, which is in charge of taxes and healthcare in the House, and he is, like me, an elder millennial. But they are different audiences that we need to communicate our messages to. What's the forecast for the 2024 election?
Wow, we're jumping to that, Allison. 24. So, there's a presidential election that is, several factors, right? One that is yet to be determined. One, the most important one, is that President Biden is going to announce his re-election. We are being told, and you talk to folks in the circles here, that his intention is that he will make an announcement sometime in April, maybe March, maybe April, but he's taking his time, certainly. But what he's showing by all the steps on it, by moving the primaries to South Carolina, for New Hampshire, for instance, is kind of laying the field for him to kind of be the Democratic nominee. That's a big assumption, but I'm being told that it's good chances that, I said, kind of, what's the percentages? They say maybe 80%. But really, the one person that really knows if he's going to run again is Jill Biden, his wife. So it'll be interesting how that plays out. But it's going to be, once that decision's made, and then you see on the other side, and Dave certainly can chime in on how many Republicans are going to decide to run,
Sure.
Besides President Trump. We'll see how that plays out, but stay tuned. It's going to be interesting.
Well, I think Nando hit it on the head. I mean, it's all around Joe Biden. What does he do? He certainly has had a really good presidential year this year so far in his young year of 2023. But it will determine a lot of things, his running or not running. Also, the interesting thing is the U.S. Senate races. That's something that I think is even more interesting to watch. There's 20 Democratic seats up this year. There's only 12 Republican seats up, whereas the last two cycles, Republicans had more seats up, and it cost them for that. Now, other things cost them as well, too, some of the issues and some of their candidates. But there's a lot of factors involved and engaged in that. Also, I happen to think that candidate quality and what happens down ballot, usually it's everything's top ballot. Anymore, sometimes it's you got to go down a couple levels to really determine how these races are going to be impacted and what the future of these races will be, who will be the winner. Perfect examples in Pennsylvania, where I believe Mr. Urbanchuk comes from. Poor quality candidate, great quality candidate on the Democrat side, really drug his people up, and the Republican candidate drug his people down. You see Fetterman winning that race, which he had some tough breaks along the line, but he ended up winning that race. You saw several Pennsylvania Democrats win, probably 3 to 4 seats, that if they had a better quality Republican candidate on the Republican side, they wouldn't have won those seats. They were really, really tough districts and expected to lose, but they did a good job on their end, but the Republicans did a very poor job on their end. So sometimes that down ballot is a good thing to keep an eye on, and I happen to think that's going to be another factor for the 2024 races.
So just piggyback on Dave's point about the Senate, the other, and we talked about, as President Biden decides to announce his re-election, there's several other Senate races that have yet to be their announcement on re-election. One is Senator Manchin from West Virginia. He hasn't officially announced that he is going to run again. He is up for re-election in 24. The other senator is Senator Sinema. There's the dynamics of that. She is now an independent. Arizona Democrat, Congressman Ruben Gallego, who is a congressman outside the Phoenix area, is running as the Democrat in that primary against whoever is going to be in that field, but he is favored to win. So it's going to be interesting how that plays out. If she decides to run as a true independent, or decides to, I'm going to step away and let the race play out. That's going to be an interesting race that's going to be announced kind of in the spring going forward. The other thing you got to keep an eye, and I just read that Senator Tester just announced, I think today, that he is going to run for re-election in Montana. That's a huge win for the Democrats and Chuck Schumer as majority leader. If that would definitely be one seat that would flip to Republican if Senator Tester did not announce his re-election. So that the dynamics of re-election is going to go forward. It's going to be how that plays out. It's very interesting overall how the control of Congress will play out for 20.
And also back to the House a little bit on that, he's exactly right. And the Democrats are doing cartwheels today with Senator Tester's, because he sure is probably going to be about as close of a lock as they can for anyone who can win that state as a Democrat. Yeah. It certainly can be him. But the House, I just got back from a National Republican Campaign Committee winter meeting in Florida, and where Speaker McCarthy was giving a presentation. And it was fascinating, and I learned some things that he mentioned during that. One of the things he mentioned was that in those poor states, poorly Republican states, that they were outperformed. The House candidates in several of those states actually outperformed their Democratic counterparts. And so they were seeing, their point was, we did a better job at candidate recruitment than probably what the Senate did. And that's probably not very argumentable in that area. I think we all could agree on that.
Yeah.
but they did a much better job. And so they have now not only found in the previous campaign in 2020, where they had more women, they had more minority candidates in the Republican Party, and they had service. So one of those three, or a combination of those three, was what won them more seats this time. So they found a little bit of a recipe there, along now with some really dynamic, good candidates. I mean, every now and then there's going to be some clunkers. There's going to be some candidates that are kind of some bomb and flamethrowers out there, but are really focusing in on that recipe for the next cycle. So it'll be interesting to see.
And it definitely made the difference with this candidate quality between that those districts that Biden won. That was about 18 districts that the Republican won. And I think what really was the X factor is the type of candidate. Either they were a woman, a minority, or both. It was just a great job by Tom Mueller, Congressman of Minnesota, who was chair of the NRCC, on recruiting these candidates to be competitive in the beginning, all throughout the race, and then ultimately pulling off the win. They need to hold on to those 18 to 20 seats to hold on to the majority, and then try to pick off a few more of those seats from the Democrat side. So again, it's a very interesting mix how this is going to play out and how that's going to have an impact on what's going to happen with the legislative agenda for this year and beyond.
You brought up the legislative agenda. Joe Biden does still have 2 years left. What are his priorities? What are the Biden administration priorities for these?
Well, I think, Allison, he wants to showcase his legislative wins. And those wins were the transportation bill, the IAJ bill, the CHIPS bill, and the IRA bill, the Inflation Reduction Act. Those are the three pieces of bill that he wants to showcase and showing, hey, we did something monumental legislatively. Here is how it's going to impact positively for your state and your community. And I think that is going to be job number one. Now, how he does that remains to be seen. He's going to obviously have to deal with other issues that are going to come and impact that schedule, or what he's going to go forward on that agenda. Now, that's the administrative agenda, right? Legislatively, there's not much that's going to happen. I think everybody has come to the recognition there's not going to be any major pieces of legislation like a transportation bill or energy bill that's going to come out of this Congress. I think everybody's gearing up for the next election already, and also gearing up for the presidential. So I think it's going to be mostly administrative actions to show what the work they've done and kind of convince people, if President Biden does decide to go and campaign to free re-election, to show that he has a record to run on. And then try to see if that has some tells for the members of Congress on the Democratic side, and see if they can pick up the House and keep the Senate. So,
Agreed. I have nothing to add with that. I happen to think that even though it's not legislative, Joe Biden has also demonstrated his world leadership. He's been on a big stage these last couple of weeks here, and he is certainly all in on the Ukrainian war. And he's really shown his leadership. He's shown the strength of that. And, it's kind of puzzles me in a way. If a Republican candidate way back would have done the same exact thing, they would have an approval rating of 80% plus. So he's got to overcome a little bit of that. He certainly has had a lot of legislative victories, as Nando's pointed out. So it's just interesting to see how his world leadership and the world stage that he's been so effective on, especially with NATO and getting them all together on that, which is not an easy job. Why isn't he more popular in rising in the polls? So I happen to think he's honing in on that a little bit. We'll see how that.
The one thing I would just going back on your question about what some of the priorities, the Congress still needs to do a lot of stuff on a yearly basis. That's passing a federal budget. The debt ceiling needs to be raised. That has to be done by approximately July, August, September timeframe, according to Treasury. And then they have to pass a defense bill. They likely would have another package for Ukraine. So you got three pieces of legislation, with the debt ceiling really having a potential major impact on the economy, right? And so there's already the game of chicken going on between the Republicans, especially in the House, and the administration, to see what we can concede from each other to get the debt ceiling vote done. We all remember back when President Obama and Speaker Boehner and the Republicans went through this issue. So we're here back again in this game, and remains to be seen who's going to come on top. But I think cooler heads will prevail, common sense will prevail, and let's hopefully that they'll pass this absentee vote with some concessions on budget and cuts or what have you, and then they can focus on passing either a federal budget or a defense bill come the fall. But they do need to get the debt ceiling vote done. That is the one priority they can't kick down the road.
Hope you're right, because the August recess will not be here, and we won't have a recess either, too. So
Yeah,
That's right. Here's the hope. Cooler heads will prevail.
Yeah.
Dave, Nando, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank
This has
you.
been another edition of the Engineering Influence podcast from ACEC, and we will have more of these going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.